How come you are moving? Yeah. Now are you moving?
I'll try to stay still.
Oh, good God, shut up. Sorry. Now is that okay?
Okay, we are now live. So I want to welcome everybody to this Google Hangout. We have the tremendous honor today to welcome the most extraordinary woman who I've had the honor to work with for a lot of years, and Jody is one of the most inspiring leaders that I've ever met. She's one of the people who can really get you off your seat and up into action because she walks the talk herself. She started a global citizens campaign to ban landmines, in the international campaign to ban landmines, and she started it back in the day before you really could do something like that easily with internet. And it's the first time ever that a global citizens movement came together and actually banned a weapon and said this weapon is just too horrible for the armies of the world to have and use. It was unprecedented. And she created that law. And so we were just so honored, Jody, that you're with us today. So maybe for all of the classrooms, we can just give a round of applause to Jody. Thank you, Jody.
I'll give one back to you.
We're very happy that we have so many great students joining us today. We have the Lester Arnold High School from Colorado. So hi to Lester Arnold. Hello, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. And then we have Blue Valley Academy from Kansas. So hi, Blue Valley. Woo! And we have Hoboken Charter from New Jersey. So hi, Hoboken Charter. Okay, great. So what we're going to do now is maybe everybody can just go on mute for the 3 classrooms until it's time for you to ask questions. And I will start by asking a couple preliminary questions for Jody that she'll answer. And then we'll go to each of you, each of the 3 different schools, and we'll ask you questions. Again, you have your opportunity to ask your questions to Jody Williams, our Nobel Peace Prize winner. So without any further ado, we're going to start. Okay. So Jody, you, in addition to all of the incredible work that you've done around the world on so many issues, you're also leading the Nobel Women's Initiative. This is something that you and Shirin Ebadi, the Nobel laureate from Iran, created. You had this idea, you put it together, and you've spent so many years speaking out for the rights of women and girls all around the world. Why? I mean, why is this issue so important to you?
Because I'm a woman. I'm joking. I mean, I'm not joking. Because it is astounding to me that in, this century, women are still having to ask men to recognize our rights. Now, I believe that all human beings are born with the same rights. And men, for a variety of reasons, choose to not recognize ours in many instances and treat us like second-class citizens. And I find that phenomenally offensive. And it makes me righteously indignant, and it makes me want to struggle for women's rights.
And you've also, with the Nobel Women's Initiative, you've headed up some delegations that have gone all over the world to really put a focus on women activists who are on the ground, on the front lines. And I think that's one of the most important things that the Nobel Women's Initiative has been doing since it was created. Can you tell me some of the stories of some of these women, some of the places that you've been to, and the things that you've learned from these women who are on the front lines?
Sure. Part of the reason that we started the Nobel Women's Initiative, which brings together 6 recipients of the Peace Prize, women, was so that we could, in effect, share the Nobel Prize. And it's when I really started feeling happy personally for having the Peace Prize, because I really believe that we are sharing the influence and access that we Nobel women have because of the Peace Prize with women working around the world for sustainable peace with justice and equality. And I've led every delegation of the Nobel Women's Initiative except one in the 8 years of our life. And I've led delegations to the Thai-Burma border when you still couldn't go to Burma, to South Sudan and Chad to see the refugee camps and meet women from the conflict in Darfur. I led a delegation to the tar sands in Canada and along a proposed route for a pipeline to carry that hideous oil to the ocean to ship it to China. Because we want to hear the women's voice. We want to stand with women and help their voices be heard. I'll just give you one little different example. As you know, Dawn, Nobel Women's Initiative has also spearheaded the campaign to stop rape and gender violence in conflict, which is now made up of 700 NGOs around the world working to stop violence against women. But we're also one of the founding organizations of the campaign to stop killer robots. And these are not drones. These are robotic weapons that on their own would be able to target and kill human beings. And when I found out about that, I was absolutely horrified that men are sitting in the military industries thinking up ways to create weapons that on their own can go out and target people. Are we so morally and ethically bankrupt that we think it is okay to give the power of life and death over humans to machines? So we created the campaign to stop killer robots, and last week the campaign and 87 governments were in Geneva for the first expert meetings on killer robots. They invited 18 experts to address the group to start conversation, and the 4 areas were ethics, the laws of war, robotics and technology, and then military operability. All 18 were men.
Wow.
All 18 were men. And then we heard subsequently that there were no women because they could not find any quote-unquote suitable women. I want to know, what the hell is a suitable woman? What is a suitable woman? Does it mean I put on a suit? I mean, what does it mean? We certainly are capable of talking about ethics, for God's sake. And there are tons of women lawyers on the laws of war. It's just another example of phenomenal gender bias, despite all of the UN resolutions about including women when we're discussing peace, you know, women, peace and security and disarmament. Makes me furious. So now we have set up a whole system of getting women's names to submit so they don't have to struggle their little brains to figure out women. And the men of our campaign have pledged to not participate in any panel on this issue that does not have women on it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Isn't that awesome? I mean, it's another example of civil society, ordinary people like us, taking the lead when governments won't, and pushing them to do what they should do anyway.
Yes. And what you're going with the killer robots is a ban on the whole concept of the killer robots, right?
Well, it's a ban on having weapons that on their own can target and kill. Yes. Yeah, I mean, I find it terrifying.
Yeah, me too. Me too. It feels like something from an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and imagine this one. There are, you know, huge supersonic plane type killer robots, and there are also little, like, bitty things. I saw a picture of a hand with a mosquito on it.
Oh.
And you look closer and that mosquito's a robot.
Wow.
Yes, and they envision these robots that, you know, little mosquito things that can fly into a room and maybe do surveillance, or fly into a room and bite you and, you know, steal a bit of your skin so they can tag you with your DNA, or they can bite you and inject a lethal poison. Think about that, people.
It's
I mean,
it's out of science fiction. I mean, there's a movie, Dune. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they had little creatures like that in that movie. But it's bringing those far out visions of the future to life.
Yeah. There's a really good book, a science fiction book by a guy named Daniel Suarez. I think it's called Kill Decision. But in it, our heroes are chased by swarms of robots. It's a very good thriller about, robotic future. Terrific. I highly recommend it.
And so the work that you're doing with women and getting their voice and getting them at the table when these decisions about war and peace are made is really important, because the victims of war, those who bear the burden of war, it's not like it was before where it was largely men. It's now largely civilians and not soldiers who bear the price. And so many of them are women and mothers and their children and their husbands and their sons. And their fathers as well, right?
Yes. Look at the refugee stats. 80% of refugees, fleeing from war are women and children. 80%, which means that women and children are bearing the brunt. And of course, when we have rape being used as a tactic of war, most of it's against women, although men are being raped too, to degrade them as well, men and boys.
Yes. So the campaign that you started for the stopping the use of rape as a weapon of war, that's a really important issue for all of the schools that are listening. This is something that has happened to denigrate and to traumatize and to silence people around the world in wartime situations, using rape against both men and women as a weapon of war. So Jody and the Nobel Women's Initiative spearheaded the effort to get lots of women's organizations first, but now it's a broad cross-section of groups together to say, again, this is something in the same way that we wanted to ban landmines and we want to ban killer robots, we want to say this cannot stand. This must be outlawed. This must be stopped worldwide. True.
Also, when I talk about it to students in the U.S. in particular, I put it in the context of a continuum of violence against women. Rape in war doesn't happen just out of the nothingness. It happens because women are treated like objects. Women are second-class citizens. And, men feel fairly free around the world to beat their wife if they are mad at her, or, all the various violences against women. And we really have to situate stopping rape and gender violence and conflict in the whole continuum of violence. And most people get very uncomfortable if you talk about rape. Because, why? It's generally women who get raped, and no offense, guys in the room, I see you. It's the men who do the raping, so it makes everybody uncomfortable. But my feeling is, stand up and say you're not a rapist, instead of wiggling in your seat and feeling uncomfortable. That's one of the things that we are calling on men to do. Stand up for and with women. And, empower yourself to be part of the change instead of feeling uncomfortable if somebody says the word rape. You know what I mean?
Yes. I know it's taking the stigma out of the word so that we can talk about the issue and address it. But it's something that's happening in our military. And finally, it's addressed. It's something that's happening at universities. Many universities are now addressing it. So the fact of naming it and stepping up and talking about it is huge. It's a first step to solving the problem.
And it's also shifting the focus from the victim to the perpetrator. Right? Why are women like doubly and triply victimized after they've been raped? With all of the disgusting questions like, did you ask for it? What were you wearing? Why don't we focus on the people who commit the crime, not the victims of the crime? But we can move to a cheerier subject, people. Okay. That in mind. That's one of the many things we work on.
I know you work on so many issues. You have so much incredible leadership that you're showing across the board on so many issues around the world. The last question I want to ask, it's about really like governments and sometimes it's religious leaders who
I
are.
see that cute African American boy wiggling in his seat. He's got a Gap sweatshirt on. You. Yeah, you. Hi. Hi, seat wiggler. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. You want to meet my cat?
We'd love to meet your cat.
Let's
What's
see.
your cat's name?
Let's see if Babette will allow herself to. I don't think. Can you see her? No.
Here,
Or
yeah.
my big white dog. Can you see her?
Yes, your big white dog.
Big white dog. See? I love animals and humans. All right, back to seriousness.
Okay, back to seriousness. The last question I have for you is why are so many leaders and factions afraid of smart girls? You know, is it so scary for some to have girls who receive an equal education to boys? You know, where does that come from, and how can we make it safer for all girls to receive an equal education?
Well, I think it's pretty fundamental. Those in power do not want to give up power, right? Whether it's a dictator or a political party in our country who's had the presidency forever and hopes that the next Democrat or Republican will win, people don't want to give up power. And from the beginning of humans, men have dominated. For all the reasons we know. The women had the babies and protected the babies, and the men went hunting and all that business. But, you know, even though society and cultures have changed, our basic, you know, man-woman thing is still sort of fundamentally wired, and I think men are threatened when women are allowed to express themselves fully, because they feel like it's taking some of their possible power away, both individually and collectively. Change is hard even when we want it, right? You know, sometimes there are things about myself I don't like and I try to change them, and it's really hard. And it's something I want to change about myself. Imagine when we're trying to change, you know, a whole framework of how the world runs, which is men running most things and women trying to have our voices heard. So when women are educated and can challenge men, it's scary.
And the girls in Nigeria, I mean, that's just full of so many situations where they want to deny education because of.
I just read a fabulous op-ed on, you know, comparing the situation in Nigeria and the attacks on education for girls to what happened in Algeria in the 90s, I think it was. I posted on Facebook. For any of you who use Facebook, I assume you all do, I friend anybody. So if you want to be my friend, you know, I'll just send a thing and I'll friend you, and you can read the kind of articles that I post, including that one.
So that's the end of the questions that I have. Now we're going to open it up. So I think the folks from Commerce City were here first, so we'll let you go first. So for Lester Arnold High School in Commerce City, if you can unmute yourself, and we'll do 2 questions for each school, and if we have time at the end, then we'll throw some more questions in. So for Lester Arnold High School, first of all, thank you for being here. Hi, everybody, and let's hear a couple of questions from you. Who would like to start?
So, how do you see the new generation of women versus your generation?
Great question.
It is a great question. I think that younger women, or the women of your generation, maybe in some parts of the world, take for granted some of the things that women have been struggling for over time. Which is a good thing in some ways, right? Because it means that the struggle has borne fruit. But I think young women need to join the struggle for human equality. It's not about women, you know, wanting to be men or women wanting to take over things that men do or are. It's about recognizing the human rights of every single individual, whether they're a man, a woman, black, brown, gay, straight, transgender. It doesn't matter. You know, you don't have to be them, but we have to really learn to accept, not just tolerate. Think about tolerate. I tolerate that. That means I don't really like it, right? I tolerate it. We need to move beyond tolerance to acceptance of other people. And young women who do feel like they're equal need to really push and make sure that what we have so far established is real and eternal. And also, there's still a lot of work to be done. And look at the reports on rape on college campuses in the U.S. Can you hear that weird noise? Oh. Maybe it's my own computer. There, I'll move. Something like 25% of freshman girls are sexually assaulted in one way or another. That is, can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Is there a lot of scratchy, weird noise?
No, but if you're close to another computer, it can do that.
I'll move into the other room.
Okay.
You know, if men and women were really equal, sexual assault on campus wouldn't be that high. So ladies, but the young woman who asked that question, can I ask you back, what do you think is different about you and your generation and my generation?
Okay, so whoever asked that question at Commerce City, what do you think? In your opinion, what's the difference between women of Jody's generation and women of your generation?
Can you repeat the question again, please?
What do you think? Jody answered the question and said what she thinks is different between her generation and your generation. But she wants to know your opinion. She wants us to be an exchange. So in your opinion, what's the difference between your generation and women of Jody's generation?
Well, I think that now, since we do have, like, since people have give women rights, we do have, like, a lot of women who work now and get to do their own stuff. And I think that back then they did have to, like you say, listen to, you know, whoever it was, the guy in the story.
So you feel like you do have equal rights?
Well, I believe it's like the belief of people, because some women still let the guy handle them, and others just do whatever they do, because they do see that women do have rights now.
Mm-hmm. So you think there's still work to be done, and you have a role to play in furthering equality for everybody?
I believe you can do it, but it's just also the opinion and the belief of that person. You can't change that person if they don't want to change.
Yeah, but do you think we have to try to change how people think?
Maybe, well, I think you can try and do, you know, what is possible to do, but it just really depends.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's hard. Change takes time. And sometimes the change takes time from over generation to generation. For most of the Nobel laureates in the world, their causes have gone on for decades and decades and decades. I mean, the success that Jody had with the international campaign to ban landmines was really an anomaly, though we still let the landmines in use, so the cause is fragmented. But usually, for example, in South Africa and in other places, it took many, many, many years, 50 years, 60 years of a struggle before generations have to pass before attitudes can change.
Well, and look at in the United States, racism still. You know, how many years since Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who struggled for racial equality, but there's still institutional, structural racism in this country, if not overt, which sometimes there is obviously overt racism. It's something we still have to be very vigilant about, and we have to struggle to make sure that there is real equality and that racism is not accepted anywhere at all.
You can't act like racism isn't going to be around at all.
Can you say that question?
Partiality.
I can hear you.
Can you say that again?
You can't expect racism to never end because it's always going to be around. There's always going to be like some races that don't like other races. There's always going to be people that don't think girls should have rights.
But why
Like
do you think
even if
that?
it's the right thing, like people are always going to have like, yeah, they're going to have their own opinion, and they're going to like, even if it's like, in our reality, it's like a wrong opinion. It's not good, but people are still going to think that way.
I believe that the basis of racism is ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but like you can tell everyone in the world that like we should all be like friends and stuff, but people are not gonna all want to be friends. Like no, regardless of what, there's still gonna be racism. Like, there's still gonna be people that don't think that women should have any rights, and there's gonna be people that think that black people should have any rights. And like it's just like it's something that's gonna be around, Like there's nothing we can like. We can try to stop it. We can like make it to where it's not accepted, but it's always gonna be around.
I think that sometimes it's hard to think differently than what you just said. Given the years and generations and decades of struggle against racism, clearly we've come a long way, but there's a lot more to be done. And I mean, if we accept that your opinion that there'll always be racism and nothing can be done, that would have stopped Martin Luther King from going to jail. That would have stopped Rosa Parks from sitting on the bus. Things change because we force people to do what they should do anyway. And I don't mean force by violence, I mean by example, by organizing, by educating, and standing up to racism, standing up to bullying. I mean, racism is bullying, in a sense. And one of the issues that I have about not fighting against racism and gender issues is that when people in power want to go to war, they use those issues to inflame passion and enable, the inflamed people to go to war. Look at what Russia did in Crimea, for example. Stirring up Russian sentiments and sending in soldiers disguised as, civilians struggling to be part of Russia. You create the other. And sometimes you create the other by saying, all Christians are infidels. Or you create the other by saying, Islam is a terrorist religion. Those are both stupid sentiments, but they're used to foment distrust and hatred. And I think that's a critical reason for us to struggle against racism. And I think we can, over time, change it. But yes, it's always going to be a struggle. I totally agree with you. But that means we have to get up off our butts and do more work to make it different.
Very good. Very good.
You can make it like to the point where it's illegal. Like segregation's already around. Like if you look at it, like you can't treat someone differently based off of the race, but people are still always going to do it. Like no one likes to be the bad guy, and if someone, whoever person thinks that that woman shouldn't have rights, there's not. I mean, they're gonna look at it like they're right. They're not going to want to be the guy. They're going to make it where they're good for them. Where like it makes sense on their side. That's the way they look at it. So we can make it to where like it's illegal and we can do whatever we can to like stop people from being racist. But they're still it's always going to be around.
Look, I think that's one perspective, but I'm going to say again, if everybody felt that way, the struggle to end racism in the U.S. never would have happened. People are shockingly capable of change. Even die-hard racists, when they have been challenged and they have the opportunity to meet people who aren't of their own race, some do change. I think, you know, just accepting it's always been that way, therefore it always will be that way, is saying we can do nothing to help shape our own world. It's saying that, you know, throwing up your hands and saying, you know, this is terrible and it's always going to be terrible, so I'm just going to do what I want and ignore the world. When you do that, you give up your own power. Now, I believe each and every one of us, not only has human rights, we have responsibilities to others in our family, others in our community, others in our state, our country, the world. And if you decide not to use your own power, somebody else will take it. When I organized and people, you know, join the campaign or whatever, that's terrific. But if other people do nothing, they're ceding their power to those of us who are willing to take action, right? And then in many ways gives us more power. I think we have a responsibility to say what we stand for. I am against racism. I am against sexism. I'm against anti-gay, etc., etc. I'm against, you know, corporations buying elections in the United States of America. Therefore, I will work on these issues by volunteering or working with other people who share the same view to change it. If I do nothing, then I cede my power to others who will continue to pollute our planet, who will, you know, continue to discriminate against people of color or gay people or transgender or whatever. I choose to be an active participant in my life, and that my life is going to be an active effort to change the world for the better for everybody, even people I don't like. And by the way, people, just because I won the Nobel Peace Prize, I did not turn into a sweet little Mother Teresa. There are many people I do not like, but I accept that they have a right to live. They have a right to live their life the way they want, as long as they are not infringing on other people's rights. I don't like everybody. And I think when Jesus said, love your brother, he didn't really mean you had to go around loving everybody. He meant don't kill them. Don't trespass on their rights, you know?
All right. Great answer. Now we're going to move to Blue Valley Academy at Kansas, from Kansas, who you were the second one to join us on this call. And I know you have some great questions for us, too. This has been such a great discussion, such a great dialogue. So Blue Valley, let's hear your first question.
I'm sorry, you might hear music in the background, and that's because it's our bell, and that's how we're changing classes. So
cool. What is the music that's played? I can't quite hear it.
What I like about you.
What I like.
It's our bell system for changing.
That's nice.
So we're not changing our class right now, though. We can still talk to you. So.
Great.
Kayla's going to ask a question.
Okay. Hi.
When did you, like, what was the first thing that you did?
What was the first thing that you did? What?
For, like, I mean, obviously you're a feminist, so what was, like, the first major thing that you did to help?
I mean, how did I start becoming an activist?
Yes.
My oldest brother, his name is Stephen, and he was born deaf. And he's 3 years older than I am. And we lived in a teeny little town in Vermont. I'm from Vermont. I still have a house there. In fact, I'm going there Saturday. Then our next door neighbors were mean to him. Billy and Bobby were their names. They were brothers. They were probably, you know, they were probably 11 or 12, you know. And they picked on my brother Steve because they loved the sound of his fear. I don't know if any of you know deaf people, and because they can't hear, they don't know how to modulate their voices the way hearing people can. And the sounds he makes when he's angry or afraid are quite strange. And Billy and Bobby got off on terrorizing my brother. They were bullies. One time I after they cut my brother's head by throwing rocks at us when we were bicycling around the neighborhood, I threw my bike down and chased after them with the full intention, if I caught them, of trying to beat them up. I used to beat up my brothers and sisters because I was stronger. I don't beat people up anymore, only verbally. But I wanted to beat up Billy and Bobby because of what they were doing to my brother. And of course, they were much older than I was, and they escaped and laughed at me and laughed at him. But that slowly translated for me into speaking up for people who either couldn't or were too afraid to speak up for themselves. I started defending other kids in grade school who, you know, were being bullied and didn't have the self-esteem or the courage to, you know, to fight back. And I don't mean physically fight. Because one time, the stud of 4th grade, his name was David, he has blonde hair and blue eyes, and he was the, you know, champion on playground. And David was always mean to Michael, who was a quintessential geek. Skinny, huge ears like my sister, Mary Beth, you know, like Dumbo ears and crooked glasses and totally unathletic. And David was always mean to him. And one day he wasn't going to let him play with us. We were playing kickball. And I remember being terrified because standing up to bullies is not easy. But I remember thinking, if all of us on the playground stand by and let one person bully geeky Michael, we're no better than the bully. We've given up our power and our responsibility to stand with others to this one bully. And so, shaking inside and shaking outside, I confronted David in front of everybody and, you know, asked him why he only picked on people who could not respond. And to my shock, he never was mean to Michael again. He let him play with all of us on the playground. And, you know, those are teeny things, but you begin to see that if you do take a position for the greater good of everybody, it gets easier and easier and easier. And then, you know, it translated the war in Vietnam. I was in college during the war in Vietnam. And that was my first protest, when my friends were getting drafted. And unlike war today, we don't see the war in Iraq or Afghanistan on television. We used to see the war in Vietnam every night on television. We used to see the soldiers in the field. We saw the dead coming back. They couldn't pretend to us that war was heroic like they do more easily. And so I protested that war, and ultimately, I started protesting U.S. foreign policy because it's militarily aggressive. And this has nothing to do with my feelings about the individual soldier. This is about the people in power who send other people's children to die. You know, when Mr. Bush invaded Iraq, which I consider to be an illegal invasion, notice that his little darling twins were not in the military. His kids didn't have to face dying, but he was more than happy to send other people's children to die for his own personal issues. So that was my start, and I just feel an overwhelming responsibility to do something when I believe it's wrong. And that's how it started. And now I can't stop, even if I'd like to. And believe me, there are days I wish I had the IQ of a large head of lettuce, which is 0. I wish I didn't care about every single thing in the world sometimes. I'd like to be just vegetative. I'd like to sit and watch reality TV or duck whatever it is and think it was cool. But I can't. I can't. I hate television, by the way. I don't watch it ever. But I can't. I'm fundamentally wired to try to help people. And that's the way it is. And by the way, helping people is fun. Our campaigns are a total blast. We are not boring, you know, people who can only talk about activism. We party, we celebrate together. they're very cool people I have the privilege of working with. It's pretty awesome.
That's right. It's the most fun I've ever had too. I love helping others.
Hey, just while I think of it, and our cool friends, are you going to the Dalai Lama's 25th celebration of his 25th anniversary of the Peace Prize?
I wasn't planning on it. Are you going to go?
We were invited. I'm going. Yeah, we're paying.
December.
So you might check into that.
Okay. Okay. Very cool.
So as you see, some of the fun people we get to be really good friends with are the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who is an amazing human being, and all the women Nobels. I mean, it's just a bunch of people who struggle for the greater good, which sounds really wimpy, but it isn't. It's hard work every single day, and I love what I do.
So we have time for one more question from Blue Valley Academy. Who would like to ask the next question?
Is that the guy in the plaid shirt that's talking?
Hi.
Yeah. What's your name?
Jake.
What? Jason? Hi. What's your question?
Do you believe that there's a large amount of sexism
In the world, or in the U.S., or?
U.S.?
U.S. only.
Oh, I think there's still sexism. It's certainly not on a par with Nigeria or Afghanistan or some of the countries in Latin America. But, I mean, look at the situation in terms of pay equity, for example. Men and women doing the same job, a woman generally earns 20% less than the man, even though she's doing the same job.
But if
that's sexism.
But I mean, it'd be sexism too if the man got less. And I mean, if the man got 20% less on average, it's sexism. There has to be somebody who's doing more.
Here's a question for you. Do you think it's okay that men get paid more than women if we're doing the same job side by side?
Well, it depends on, I mean, if my work is something I'm working a lot harder than somebody else, I might get it. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that one of them, if it was men or women, that would be paid less.
Conceptually, as an idea, do you think it's right that women and men doing the same job, men get paid more?
Well, it depends on.
Here's an example right now. Jill Abramson was the editor-in-chief of the editorial section of the New York Times. First woman, I think, to hold that position. I think she's been in the job for a year or maybe two at the most. She recently found out that the man who was the editor before her made significantly more money than she did. And his pension, for retirement was bigger than hers. When she brought it to the attention of her boss, they fired her.
Do you necessarily think that because she was
I think it's sexism.
Why would it be?
Because until recently, well, the federal workers now have the right to know what their co-workers are earning. Okay, one of the ways to discriminate in terms of pay for equal work is that private companies generally tell their employees that they are not allowed to tell what they make. Okay, and it's a way to enforce, on equal pay for equal work. And she found out that that was happening in her case, and I would do the same thing. She went to her boss and said, "Excuse me, I'm editing, he edited, we sit at our desk." It's not, not like she's out building an automobile or something. The exact same job. And they fired her and pretended that it's because she was too pushy.
But
Do men ever get fired for being pushy? For demanding their rights? No. Just go and look at the statistics. Jason, go look at the statistics about unequal pay. It's not just here in the US, it's also in the European Union. It's about the same across the European Union. I just was in France with the woman who's the Minister of Women's Rights and with the French president launching a new effort across the European Union for an end to inequality. Even though the states of the European Union are much more progressive than the US in terms of men and women and pay equality, etc., they're still bad. I mean, it's shocking. We're not talking about, you know, tribes in Darfur who don't have income like that. We're talking about companies that make a lot of money but that are still willing to pay me 20% less than my colleague Sam, and we're doing the same job. And no offense, I'm probably smarter than Sam. Sam the boy.
But are you doing the same job in the same?
Yes, but I don't get paid. I volunteer, so that's. But I'm just saying, I know people who are doing exactly the same job as a man, and the man is getting paid more. And it's the exact job. Why is that okay?
Or what if it's because the man is working at a rate?
What if the man is lazier and he's still getting more money?
Well, then that's obviously sexism. But if it's the other way around, you can't just say, because I'm going to prefer a rate.
I think that this is a job, X. Okay, the job is X. I advertise for a new person to fill job X. I don't say what the salary is. I say there's a range. And if a man applies, I offer him the high end of the range. If a woman applies for the same job, I offer her 20% less than I offered the man. Is that okay? You don't even know how well they work. It's just because one's a man and one's a woman.
No, I'm not saying no. I don't think that's
Well, that's what happens generally. It's not because men across the board do more than women. It's ridiculous. In fact, women end up doing more because they work and then they have to go home and clean the house and cook the dinner and take care of the kids. There is a change in men these days, but not a big enough change. Men still expect their wife to be a wife when they get home. Women should be paid double.
We have to move over to Hoboken Charter School now because we're going to be running out of time and we want to make sure you all have a chance to ask your two questions. So let's hear for the first question from Hoboken Charter School in New Jersey.
Hi.
Hello, good
Hi, we're back with the guy in the Gap shirt. You. Hi, people.
Good afternoon. So our first question is, we know that you've recently been in Geneva and you're trying to get international support for the ban on killing robots.
Mm-hmm.
Our question is, what inspired you to support this cause and what obstacles have you faced in countering this?
Mm-hmm. Excuse me, I was really sick in Geneva. A few years ago, I was writing an article on drones. You guys know what drones are, I assume? Yeah. Okay. I was writing an article on drones and their use by the CIA, the U.S. military, and the mercenaries that they hire to work with them. Okay? And I was making the case about the illegality of using drones to murder people in countries where we are not at war, right? Like, we have attacked people in Somalia, we've attacked people in Yemen, we've attacked people in Libya, we've attacked in Sudan, I think we might have attacked in Indonesia, but I'm not positive about that one. And we are not at war with any of those countries. So when you attack people in countries where you are not at war, it is a crime. It is not just, whoops, we're killing terrorists. You're breaking international law. So I was writing about that, and I was actually writing about it for a CIA-associated magazine. And as I was doing the research on the drones and the mercenaries and all that, I came upon information about the fact that drones are like, in a few years, they're going to be like the Model T. I don't know if you all know the Model T car. The first car is very antique. Drones are going to be like a Model T compared to the robotic weapons that they are doing research and development on. I came into my kitchen, where I am right now. My husband, who I met banning landmines, his name is Steve Goose, and he is the executive director of the Arms Division at Human Rights Watch. The Arms Division is weapons. We met banning landmines, and then he was a leader in the effort to ban cluster munitions. So I come in the kitchen, and I'm like hysterical. Not in a girl way, in an activist way. Like, I'm really angry. Like, can you believe this? I can't believe that human beings are so depraved that they are actually thinking it's cool to have machines that can go out and kill people. Think how much easier it would be to go to war if you don't have to worry about your own soldiers dying. I mean, that's one of the so-called benefits of drones, right? You get to go out and whack people, and your own soldiers do not have to face them. When you kill somebody with a drone, they have no opportunity for surrender, which is a violation of the laws of war. Any combatant should have the opportunity to surrender. When you are whacked by a drone, you cannot surrender. Imagine when it is totally machines with no human being. At least in the drone, a human being is firing the weapon. So it totally freaked me out. Scared me more than nuclear weapons. And I grew up in the generation that was terrified of nuclear war. I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis with Kennedy coming on the television and saying that we were on the brink of war. It was terrifying. So I started, discussing it over time with my husband and convinced him that we should bring non-government organizations together, just like we did with landmines and he did with clusters, and start a campaign to stop killer robots. And we launched it a year ago in April in London with a robot, a friendly robot. If you go to our, just Google killer robot campaign, and you'll see pictures of, we named him David Reckham. Anyway, we launched it a year ago, and from April to November, that short a time, we took an issue that was not discussed in the general public and made it so public that governments felt pressed to come together this past week in Geneva and start talking about it. That is a clear example of a small group of people who see a potential wrong that will harm, millions around the world, coming together and saying, wait a minute, you don't have a right. Who elected you to create these things? Have you ever heard a guy running for office say, I support research and development of killer robots? Who would vote for that person? Well, I know some would, but a lot of people wouldn't. All we hear from candidates is, I support strong defense. I don't even know what the hell strong defense means, to be quite honest. Our Defense Department is actually a Department of War. If you think about it. There's another thing you can do, and there's a professor at Evergreen State University in, I think it's Washington State. It's not Washington, it's Oregon. He has compiled the list of every single military operation that the U.S. has been involved in since the beginnings, since we committed genocide against the Native Americans. And the last time I looked at it, there were only 24 years in our entire history where we were not involved in some sort of military action. And yet Americans think we're a peace-loving country. Hello! Wake up and smell the coffee! You can't be invading countries around the world since you were created, you know who that is, from the time we're created, and then pretend that we are a peace-loving nation. So for all those reasons, I get agitated and fight to stop killer robots before they're out there killing people on their own. I think it's insane.
But it's exciting that you've made so much progress and gotten attention to and so quickly. That's very, very fast.
Yeah, we're shocked. We're wondering if it's a stall tactic on their part, honestly, to take it to UN discussion so it can take 50 years to figure it out. We'll see.
We'll see. Yeah. And Hoboken, we have time for one more question from you. Hoboken Charter School.
Okay. What do you suggest we can do to support and inform the world about this global campaign?
Could you say that again? Your voice kind of went in and out.
What do you suggest we can do to support and inform the world of this global campaign?
I would suggest that you go to our website, and there should be a page that says things you can do. You could start a student group on at school to educate other students and to educate people in your community about killer robots. We have material. The best thing to do is inform yourself and get involved with us. Is that a good enough response?
What's the website address?
It's probably killerrobots.org, but just Google Killer Robot Campaign. It'll come up. Wait a minute. No, Google Killer Robot Campaign. You'll find it.
Why don't a lot of people know about this?
Because we just started it. But a lot of people are starting to know about it. We now have 51 organizations involved in the campaign with campaigners in 70 countries. So we went from nothing to that in a year's time. And we're still working to make it bigger and all that stuff. So you can be in on the ground floor and start school groups working on it. I invite you to make like an animated video against killer robots. How fun would that be? Do you guys do that stuff?
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So we've run out of time for questions. We want to just give Jody a few minutes, maybe 3 minutes, to sum up and say anything final that you want to say. Really great dialogue and very wide-ranging.
Yeah. I wish that we were actually all together. It's more fun when it's really face-to-face, but this isn't bad. I would just encourage you to believe that you have the power to bring about change in the world and not wait for other people to do it for you. Other people don't necessarily know better solutions than you do. And the thing is, I think people think if I can't bring about world peace overnight, there is nothing that can be done. I totally do not believe that. I believe that every single action we take matters. And it's better to make those actions consciously, thinking about what you want to contribute to change, than just sort of blundering through life. I started as a volunteer. The first time I started working against U.S. foreign policy in Nicaragua and El Salvador in the 1980s. I went to hear a guy from El Salvador talk. I was astounded that the U.S. was again militarily intervening. Shockingly, I had thought we learned something from Vietnam. We did not. So I was so upset that I volunteered. A couple hours a week, I would volunteer for the organization. And that ultimately led to me being so impassioned that I got a paying job. And here I am. Still an activist, still a grassroots activist. However, with the little Nobel Peace Prize, it made Mom and Dad very happy. They stopped bugging me about being a lawyer or something they could explain. And I will say that for my parents, it was a very big deal. My father had to leave high school at the end of 8th grade to get a job to help support his 7 brothers and sisters. And my parents got married when she was still finishing up high school, and by the time she was 23, she had 4 children. So I don't come from a trust fund, silver spoon in my mouth background. But I had loving parents who let me, you know, take the path in life I had to take. And they supported that emotionally. Certainly not with money, because, you know, you can't give money if you don't have it. But they were there and supporting and still wishing I'd be a lawyer, because it'd be easier to explain to their friends. But then I got the Nobel Peace Prize, and now I walk on water. But believe in yourself and believe that you have the right and the power to be involved in change. That's my message. Thank you all. Let me give you the clap. I again invite you to join me on Facebook. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you so much, and thank you for you guys got a tour of a Nobel Peace Prize winner's house. So I hope you
show you everything. Bye, people.
Bye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Great. We should do this again, people.
We'll do it again for
Have
sure.
a good day.
Okay, you have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.